Welcome back, everybody. Today we'll be discussing the Federalist Papers and the Anti-Federalists still, and specifically their debate over Montesquieu, who I have here on the screen for you. Montesquieu was a French aristocrat, very famous, wrote a book called The Spirit of the Laws, published in 1748. And this book became extremely influential because he talked about the separation of powers, about political liberty, and how to reform republican forms of government. Now, he was very influential in France, and after him became Rousseau, and there was a French Revolution in France, and Montesquieu and Rousseau were extremely important. Montesquieu in some ways is more moderate, Rousseau was a little bit more extreme. Now, in the United States, we had the influence of Montesquieu, not Rousseau. In that way, for that reason, our constitutional government is a little bit more moderate for that reason. In some ways, probably a better influence. Now, as I mentioned, he reformulated classical republicanism, and you could say was in search of political liberty, not virtue. So if you think of Sparta, if any of you watched the movie 300, what is the virtue of Sparta? It's to raise good soldiers, to be virtuous. That's the purpose of that government. And they had a king and it had an aristocracy, but the whole purpose of it, and it had slaves, was to be virtuous in the sense of being good warriors. In other societies, virtue meant different things. But what Montesquieu says is that his new republicanism is not going for virtue. It's for going for political liberty. That's what's most important. And he looks at the English Constitution as an example of how to secure political liberty as opposed to virtue. Now, what is Montesquieu's definition of political liberty? Normally, I would have you read this, but it's a little bit dense, and hopefully you'll read Montesquieu and some of the other classes here. And if you would like to read it, I can tell you that it's book 11, The Spirit of the Laws, chapters 1 through 6. I would highly recommend it, actually, but just for the sake of simplicity, I didn't assign it. This is how he defines political liberty. Political liberty is tranquility of spirit, which comes from the opinion each one has of his security. So I think the most important word here is security. Political liberty means your rights are secure. Political liberty does not mean being able to go vote or go do a variety of other things. Now, today, of course, we think that voting and other aspects ensure security, but that's the primary purpose of government, is securing of individual rights. And we see this in the Declaration of Independence and throughout the Constitution and in Locke and others, that it's about securing individual rights. That's what liberty means. It's a negative liberty. Liberty to have my rights protected from the government, for them not to come take my rights. That's the whole pinnacle of liberty. Now, I'll read from how he says political liberty is found. He says, political liberty is found only in moderate governments, but it is not always in moderate states. It presents only when power is not abused. But it has eternally been observed that any man who has power is led to abuse it. He continues until he finds limits. Who would think it? Even virtue has need of limits. So Montesquieu, this is a fundamental maxim of Montesquieu's political science, of his way of understanding the world. It's that power is going to be abused. Power is led to abuse power. So how do you stop it? You have to put limits. You have to check it by other powers. Even virtue, even the virtuous leaders. That's why Madison says, enlightened statesmen won't always be at the helm. We can't rely on religious and moral virtue. That is not enough. So power must check power by the arrangement of things. This is what Montesquieu says later on. So i.e., this means separation of powers. By the separation of powers, you can check power, and this is our fundamental system. So the legislature checks the judiciary checks the legislature, the executive, vice versa. But Montesquieu, an important part of Montesquieu, this is in book 11, chapter 6 of The Spirit of the Laws, again, that you did not read. He talks about the mixed regime of England in their constitution. So they have a monarchy and aristocracy, and that's how he thinks they find good government, one that's stable, energetic, and free. But again, as we saw last time, Madison is trying to find a form of republicanism in an unmixed regime where there is no monarchy, where there is no aristocracy. Now in Federalist 47, we saw this debate over Montesquieu. The Anti-Federalists charged that the Constitution violates the separation of powers. In some ways, the British system was different. What he was talking about was very different. He was talking about two distinct classes. There was a monarchy and aristocracy. And what the Anti-Federalists fear is that the executive and the judicial branches will have too much power. Even though they think that this system will work, they say, no, Montesquieu was talking about a different system. It's not going to work here. You can't have this separation of powers. We saw this in the Sentinel essay, which we'll talk about here in a second. And in Federalist 47, they acknowledge that there is a Montesquieuian insight here. The accumulation of all powers is the definition of liberty. Yes, this is dangerous. We don't want power to be in one. So we don't want power in the executive. We don't want all the power to be in the judiciary either. And that's why they're going to have a separations of power and they're going to go against each other. But the Anti-Federalists are not so certain about that. But the Federalists say, look, in order to check and balance these powers, each branch of government must have the power to control the other parts. And we'll see a little bit more of this discussion in Federalist 51. So Madison, again, like in Federalist 10, gives us a kind of counterintuitive argument. Fire must fight fire, basically. Ambition must be made to check ambition. We can't rely on virtue. We can't rely on the more classical republicanism that says that faction needs to be suppressed, that you need to have homogeneity amongst this everybody in society, and everybody has to agree. There has to be a sort of kumbaya. No, Madison says that's not the answer. It's kind of like firefighters, where in order to stop the spread of the fire, they'll burn a certain area so the fire can't keep moving. That's how you really solve the problem. So why don't I read for us from page 318 here at the very bottom, the last sentence. But the great security against the gradual concentration of the several powers in the same department consists in giving to those who administer each department the necessary constitutional means and personal motives to resist encroachments of the other. The provision for defense must in this, as in all other cases, be made commensurate to the danger of attack. Ambition must be made to counteract ambition. This is a very famous phrase by Madison. So you have to have the presidency. The president of the United States, he wants his honor and fame, and so he's going to try to be a certain way, and it's going to cause him to be a better leader. And if he doesn't, the other people are going to check him. And even though he may try to be corrupt, the legislature or the judiciary is going to make sure that he doesn't do that, and they're going to have the power to check him. Now, what are Madison's reflections on human nature? He says, this is why we have to have the system of checks and balances and this ambition checking ambition. We can't have a rule of virtue and get rid of ambition, get rid of faction. We can't do that. Why is that? Well, here's why. It may be a reflection on human nature that such devices be necessary to control the abuses of government. This is on 319. But what is government itself but the greatest of all reflections on human nature? If men were angels, no government would be necessary. If angels were to govern men, neither external nor internal controls on government would be necessary. In framing a government which is to be administered by men over men, the great difficulty lies in this. You must first enable government to control the governed, and in the next place, oblige it to control itself. A dependence on the people is no doubt the primary control on the government. This is what the Anti-Federalists want. Strong control by the people, have the people have a short leash on the representatives. But experience has taught mankind the necessity of auxiliary precautions. You need other ways to control the government, and that is by having within the government structure these separation of powers that check one another, that check the ambitions of the other. That's how you do it, not by sole reliance on the people. Now, Madison wants to say, well, what branch predominates in a Republican government? He says it's the legislature. But then this is a question that I should pose to you today. Is this true? Is the strongest branch of government the legislature? Many people argue that it's the judiciary. Other people argue that it's the president. Now, both on the left and the right, some people say, well, that's good. Yeah, we want the president to have more power, or we want the judiciary to have more power. But then again, it's a question, well, does the legislature have as much power as Madison thinks it does? That's a question for you. Now, he makes, again, the argument for the large republic. And part of this argument is that there's a multiplicity of interests. And we'll read from the bottom of 320. Second, it is of great importance in a republic not only to guard the society against the oppression of its rulers, but to guard one part of the society against the injustice of the other part. Different interests necessarily exist in different classes of citizens. If a majority be united by a common interest, the rights of the majority will be insecure. There are but two methods for providing against this evil. The one by creating a will in the community independent of the majority. This is a monarchy. That is the society itself. And he talks about hereditary self-appointment. And he says, and then I'm going to skip here a couple sentences. The second method will be exemplified in the Federal Republic of the United States, while all authority in it will be derived from the dependent on the society itself will be broken into so many parts, interests, and classes of citizens that the rights of individuals or of the minority will be little in danger from interest combinations in the majority. In a free government, the security of civil rights must be the same as that of religious rights. It consists in the one case in the multiplicity of interests, another in the multiplicity of sects. So you have lots of different interests in society, and you have lots of different sects, a lot of interest groups, a lot of different ways in society. So that ensures that one source, it's just like in religion. So if you have one society that's ruled by Catholicism or by Protestantism or by Islam, they might be able to tyrannize over the minority. But when you have many sects and many interests, it becomes more difficult. So this is, again, the sort of idea of fighting fire with fire. Have multiple interests, don't allow one majority to gain power. And that's the Madisonian system. Our system is built upon that. And I'll just read for you at the very bottom of 321. Justice is the end of government. Justice is the end of government. It is the end of civil society. It ever has been, never will be pursued until it be obtained, or until liberty be lost in the pursuit. In a society under the forms of which the stronger faction can readily unite and oppress the weaker, anarchy may as truly be said to reign as in a state of nature. Again, here we have the state of nature philosophy that both the Federalists and Anti-Federalists agree on, where the weaker individual is not secured against the violence of the stronger. And as in the latter state, even the stronger individuals are prompted by the uncertainty of their condition to submit to a government which may protect the weak as well as themselves. So here we have, again, the state of nature philosophy and the importance of justice is the end of government, but what is justice? How do you define justice, Madison? It's the protection of rights, individual rights, the rights of life, liberty, and property, or as Jefferson will say, the pursuit of happiness, which is a little bit more expansive. Now, I want to briefly discuss Sentinel-1. He raises some serious objections to Madison, and I hope you read that carefully, but I just want to summarize for you. He says, private interest and ambition does not lead to welfare and happiness of the community, right? This Madisonian idea that ambition checking ambition, private interest checking private interest is going to lead to the welfare and happiness of the society is baloney. It's not going to happen. It's going to be what we have today, some people argue, where it's the rich and the powerful steamrolling the poor. That's it. And Sentinel says, a Republican government can only exist where representatives have the greatest responsibility to their constituents. Again, a short leash where the representatives can't go off and do things that the constituents don't want them to do. And the people are virtuous and where property is pretty equally divided. These are things that we don't think of today. The people must be virtuous. Today, we don't like to use the word virtue, but the Anti-Federalists do. You have to have a virtuous people. How can you have a sturdy and stable foundation of a house if the bricks are crumbling? If you want to have strong bricks, the citizenry needs to be virtuous. Virtue will ensure that the people are good citizens and they care about self-government. Again, virtue is kind of, it means excellent in the Greek, but here when they're talking about virtue, it's not necessarily being the more morally virtuous people, although that's a strong element of it, but it's really virtuous citizens, people that want to go out and vote. I think today we have a problem where nobody wants to go out to vote. There's no real civic virtue. People don't care about their local communities as much. And the Anti-Federalists would say, well, here you go. That's why we have the problem today, because we don't have the civic virtue. If we want to really have a strong government, we need individuals that are civically virtuous, and we need a society, a constitution that promotes virtue, not the Constitution of the Federalists. And he says a simple structure of government is needed where people can know who's responsible for abuse of power. I think this happens today. We always say, well, we're going to have a probe into who abused this power. But oftentimes we don't know. It's so complicated. We can't really know what exactly is going on. So what they say is we need a simpler system where we know who is to blame and who is to be punished. That's the issue. We need a simple system. This idea of power checking power is not going to work. Now I'm going to stop sharing my screen for just 1 second here because I want to read from Sentinel-1. Quotes Adams. And he says this essential condition. This is on page, it's in your Google Doc. He's talking about Mr. Adams. He says the essential aspect of a good government is 3 balancing powers. He asserts that the administrators of each government will ever be actuated by views of private interest and ambition to the prejudice of the public good. And therefore, the only effectual method to secure the rights of the people and promote their welfare is to create opposition of interest between the members of the 2 distinct bodies. This hypothesis supposes human wisdom competent to the task of instituting 3 co-equal orders in government in corresponding weight. And he says, look, that's not possible. We're not going to be able to do that. And then if you skip a little bit farther down, he says, suppose the government could be formed and supported on such principles. Would it answer the great principles of civil society? If the administrators of every government are actuated by views of private interest and ambition, how is the welfare and happiness of the community to be a result of such jarring adverse interests? Again, if politicians only care about their private interest and ambition, how can the welfare and happiness of the community be secured? Now, I want to leave you with that note and that question. It's kind of a radical question. Is there something fundamentally defective about our Constitution? Does it actually promote the welfare and happiness of all? Or is it too given to giving power to politicians and allowing them to be ruled by their ambition and private interests? That's a serious charge. And that's one of the lasting criticisms of the Anti-Federalists. One that the Federalists have a response to, but maybe not the fullest response. So with that, I want to leave you with that question. Can the Madisonian system lead to good leaders and to good society, welfare, and happiness? And lastly, is virtue needed? Is civic virtue needed within the citizenry? With that, I'll leave you. Please email me if you have any questions, and I look forward to hearing any comments.